Don't you want to try the coffee I made just for you, sweetheart? Daniel Monroe asked with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We were sitting around Olivia Harper's immaculate dining table in her Nashville home for our usual monthly family brunch. I, Valerie Monroe, 31 years old and head of strategy at one of the city's top marketing firms, stared down at the coffee cup in front of me. It smelled wrong. Metallic. Bitter. Not like any roast I'd ever had. Across from me, Olivia stirred her own coffee slowly, though she hadn't taken a sip. Her eyes flicked between mine and Daniel's. Daniel's been experimenting with new brews lately, she said with that sly little smile she wore when she wanted to sound innocent. He's getting really good at it, especially for you. The emphasis in her tone made my spine tighten. I'd been sick more times than I could count in the last 6 months, always after a shared drink or meal at Olivia's place. Urgent care visits. Mysterious symptoms. A week of migraines. A stomach so wrecked I thought I was dying. But doctors always waved it off. Food sensitivity. Stress. Random virus. That might have worked, if it hadn't always happened when Olivia was cooking or serving, and Daniel was smiling that same offbeat smile. Today, though, everything inside me screamed no. The scent wafting up from the cup was like the tea I'd had at Olivia's a month ago, the one that sent me to the ER. She swore she made it the same way she always did. I remembered her concern. I remembered Daniel's worry. But mostly I remembered the look they shared when they thought I wasn't watching. I raised the cup slowly, acting as though I would take a sip. I smiled back at Daniel. How sweet, I said, pretending to check my phone. Oh shoot. I need to make a quick work call. Olivia, can I use your study? Of course, she replied, her tone too fast, too eager. I stood, walked behind her, and as I passed, I pretended to trip, my hand hitting the edge of the table just enough to create a distraction. In that moment, I switched our cups. Hers for mine. No one noticed. Or so I thought. Sorry about that, I mumbled, regaining my footing. What a klutz. Olivia gave me a tight smile and nodded. I disappeared into her study, door slightly ajar, where I could still see the dining room. My heart thundered. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe to prove I wasn't imagining it. Maybe to end months of self-doubt and suspicion. Maybe to be wrong. Minutes passed. Olivia picked up her cup and took a careful sip. Then another. And then something changed. Her hand trembled slightly. She set the cup down. Her face drained of color. Daniel, she whispered, her voice taut with panic. I don't feel right. Daniel looked up from his phone, confused at first. Then horror settled across his face like a slow wave. He stood up fast, knocking over his chair. Wait, wait. Which cup? Olivia, what did you? She was already swaying, gripping the edge of the table. What did you put in that coffee? She gasped. That was all I needed. I stepped out of the study, phone in hand, the camera already recording. That wasn't my cup, I said, my voice ice cold. Daniel turned pale. Olivia collapsed onto the floor, shaking violently. Call an ambulance, she begged, her voice cracking. Please. I can't breathe. I was already on it. Emergency services. My sister-in-law is having a reaction to something she drank. We're at 1542 Maple Grove Drive. Please hurry. Daniel crouched beside her, eyes wild. That wasn't supposed to be your cup, he whispered. But I caught it. Every word. And so did my phone. From the ground, Olivia looked up at me. She was trembling, but not just from the toxins. Her eyes, always calculating, now filled with fear. You switched them. You knew. I did, I said quietly, still recording. And now everyone else will too. The ambulance siren screamed in the distance as I crouched near the entryway, still holding my phone steady, still recording. Daniel's hands hovered above Olivia, trembling, unsure whether to help or run. She was pale, drenched in sweat, her breathing sharp and ragged. For once, her voice had no sharpness, just fear. This is all your fault, Olivia hissed, barely audible. You said it would just make her miss the board meeting next week. You promised it wouldn't trace. Her words cut through the air like broken glass. I didn't flinch. The Johnson pitch, I said calmly, almost to myself. You didn't want me there. Daniel looked up, eyes hollow. It wasn't meant to go this far, he muttered. Just a few days. A setback. You were working too hard. Too hard? Was that what they told themselves? That slowly poisoning me was some twisted act of mercy? A way to knock me off a career path they felt entitled to? You poisoned me for months, I said, my voice low and sharp. You watched me writhe on the floor, call out of meetings, miss deadlines. And you smiled like you cared. The paramedics burst through the front door. Daniel jumped back. I moved aside to let them in. She drank coffee, we think it was laced with something, I said clearly, eyes still on Olivia. I have her confession on video. They got to work fast, checking vitals, setting up fluids, loading her onto the stretcher. Olivia's fingers clawed weakly at the air. Don't let them arrest me, she whispered. Daniel said it wouldn't hurt, not like this. Daniel looked like a man unraveling. I'll ride with her, he blurted out, desperation leaking through his voice. No, I said firmly. You're staying right here. As the ambulance took off, I emailed the video to my private account, then forwarded it to my attorney. The insurance firm I worked for had a strict zero-tolerance policy for internal sabotage, and what I had now was more than enough to bring both of them down. 20 minutes passed. Daniel paced like a trapped animal. We were just trying to slow you down, he finally said. You're always taking the big clients. Olivia she felt overshadowed. You made her feel invisible. I turned, my glare piercing. So you both decided to make me sick? Take away everything I've worked for? You let me think I was going crazy. His silence answered every unspoken question. At the hospital, Olivia was stabilized but still in a fragile state. Dr. Morgan Hall, a sharp-eyed woman with years of experience, greeted me outside the room. We found multiple toxins in her system, she said. Nothing you'd find in an average kitchen. This was deliberate. I handed over my phone. Start here, I told her. You'll want to hear what she said at brunch. Dr. Hall played the recording, her face shifting from clinical to concerned. We're notifying the authorities, she said after it ended. Detective Carter will meet you shortly. Stay nearby. And then I saw him, Daniel, lurking near the hallway entrance. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes rimmed with panic. Valerie, please, he called. Just let me explain. Stay where you are, Dr. Hall barked, pressing the emergency button. Within seconds, security was on him. I was protecting you, he cried. You don't understand. But I did. Perfectly. I pulled up the screenshots I'd saved, texts I'd secretly forwarded to myself days ago. Messages between Daniel and Olivia. Strategizing when to hit me with another episode. Planning to ruin my presentation. One message in particular stood out. She'll never make it to the Henderson pitch if this batch works. Dr. Hall raised an eyebrow as I showed her. You've been building a case, she said. I've been surviving one, I replied. Security held Daniel by the arms. You went through my phone? You left poison in your desk drawer, I said. What did you expect me to do? His jaw trembled, and for a moment, I almost thought he'd break into tears. But I had no room left for sympathy. Not after 6 months of pain, confusion, and lies. Detective Elise Carter arrived shortly after, her tone crisp and grounded. She listened carefully as I walked her through each incident. My hospital visits, the strange timing, the drinks, the false concern. You kept records? She asked. I nodded, opening a separate folder on my phone. Dates. Symptoms. Photos. Audio files. Every quiet act of sabotage. Documented. You've done half our job for us, she said. I wasn't proud of needing to do it. But I was proud I had. As Olivia lay hooked to monitors, and Daniel sat trembling in a white-walled waiting room, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated, practiced, and almost perfect. But they made one mistake. They underestimated me. Detective Elise Carter stood still as stone beside me, flipping through the notes I had compiled with painstaking detail. The page glowed on her tablet under the hospital's fluorescent lights, lists of dates, symptoms, locations, and the subtle but consistent pattern of illness that had haunted me for nearly a year. 3 separate hospital visits in 6 months, she said aloud, all after meals shared with Daniel or Olivia. and each incident carefully dismissed as stress or coincidence. I nodded slowly. They never pushed hard, just enough to derail me. But when I kept pushing forward, they escalated. She scrolled further through the recordings. And here, she said, voice tightening, Olivia says outright, James said we just needed to discredit you. Daniel, I corrected softly. His real name is Daniel, but I used to call him James. It feels wrong to say his name now. Detective Carter's face softened. It's common for victims to dissociate from their abuser's identity. What's uncommon is what you've done, built a paper trail that could crack this case wide open. Down the hall, I heard footsteps echo as another officer returned carrying a plastic evidence bag. Inside were 3 small vials, labeled with faded pharmaceutical codes. They had been pulled from Daniel's desk at the Anderson Harper marketing firm, the company Olivia co-owned. The officer handed the bag to Dr. Morgan Hall, who reviewed the contents without a word. Her face darkened. This one, she said, tapping the middle vial, contains a neurological agent designed for controlled lab use only. If Valerie had consumed this full dose, the damage would have been permanent. Possibly fatal. I turned toward Olivia's hospital room, just visible through the glass. She looked frail now, curled in a tight ball on the bed, eyes half-lidded, the mask of arrogance stripped clean. No more smirks. No more veiled insults. Just fear. Dr. Hall continued. What's worse is the dosing pattern. Each incident recorded in Valerie's log aligns with a chemical fingerprint. These weren't mistakes, they were tests. Someone was calculating her response and adjusting accordingly. Like a science project, I muttered bitterly. Like a slow poisoning campaign, Detective Carter added. Planned by people who had access to your life and your trust. I heard movement behind me. Daniel. Flanked by 2 security guards, hands trembling. I want to speak to my wife, he said. Please. You lost that right the day you put poison in her cup, Detective Carter said, blocking his path. Sit down, Mr. Monroe. I never wanted to kill her, he blurted. It was just to slow her down. She was going too fast, burning out. Olivia said if we could just make her miss that one pitch, we'd protect her from the stress. The absurdity of his words left the room in silence. You tried to protect me? I said, stepping forward, my voice cold and clear. You watched me crawl to a bathroom floor. You timed my collapse before presentations. You took my pain, my confusion, and turned it into your cover. Daniel's eyes darted. You always had so much. The clients. The attention. You didn't even see what it was doing to Olivia. She had everything, I said. But it wasn't enough. She wanted my downfall. And you handed it to her. Through the glass, Olivia stirred, as if sensing we were talking about her. But her face remained blank. Maybe she realized the walls were closing in. Maybe she was already thinking of her defense. We'll be seizing both of their phones, Detective Carter said, turning to the officer. And I want a full search warrant for their homes and offices. If they planned this for months, there's more. Another detective arrived, holding a tablet with fresh results. He whispered something to Dr. Hall, who looked visibly disturbed. They found traces of the same compound in one of Valerie's hair samples from a prior visit, she said. A pattern spanning over a year. The timeline stretched further than I thought. My stomach turned. How long had I been their experiment? I need to give a statement, I told Carter. Formally. Now. Are you sure? She asked gently. I nodded. Every word they buried me under. I'm digging it back out. I followed her into a private room, sat down across from a clean recording mic, and began telling my story. From the first strange illness, to Olivia's cold glances, to Daniel's subtle gaslighting. I recited dates like they were carved into my bones. I handed over screenshots. Emails. Voicemails. Everything. When I finished, there was no applause. Just silence. Heavy, final, and necessary. By nightfall, Daniel had been taken into custody. Olivia, still recovering, was placed under arrest in her hospital bed. As the officers read her rights, she didn't speak. Just stared out the window, watching a world she no longer controlled. The trap they set for me had snapped shut. But not on its target. It caught the ones who built it. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not physically, just emotionally sterile, like a space where facts mattered more than feelings, where justice wore a neutral expression. I sat quietly behind the prosecutor's table, hands clasped tightly in my lap, while the bailiff called the room to order. The case of Valerie Monroe versus Daniel Monroe and Olivia Harper was about to begin. Daniel entered first, his suit wrinkled, eyes sunken, and jaw clenched. His once polished appearance now betrayed the weight of his unraveling world. Behind him, Olivia walked slowly, her posture stiff, her once glowing presence dulled by weeks of legal pressure and public scrutiny. Her designer blazer couldn't cover the tension clinging to her like fog. The prosecutor stood, her voice firm. The state intends to prove that the defendants, Daniel Monroe and Olivia Harper, willfully and repeatedly conspired to poison Valerie Monroe over an extended period. The motive: professional jealousy and personal resentment. The means: deliberate use of toxic substances masked in food and drink. The outcome: multiple hospitalizations, psychological trauma, and the near loss of life. I watched the jury shift uncomfortably. Witnesses were cold. First, Dr. Morgan Hall. She spoke with clinical precision, describing the toxins found in Olivia's system after the coffee incident and the chemical matches to previous substances found in my tests. The compound, she explained, is a restricted neuroagent used in pharmaceutical trials. Not available over the counter. Not something you'd accidentally find in your spice rack. Next came Detective Elise Carter. She presented the text messages, the email threads, and the timeline I had painstakingly documented. The courtroom projector displayed screenshots of messages like, "Make sure she doesn't show up Monday and double the dose this time. She bounced back too fast." Every message felt like a blade being dragged across old wounds. I sat still, each word validating every night I had doubted myself. Every time I'd questioned whether I was just imagining things. I wasn't. Then came the recordings. The audio of Olivia's voice trembling, gasping on the floor as she hissed, "You switched the cups, you knew," and Daniel's panicked whisper, "That wasn't meant for you." The jury flinched. Even the judge looked briefly shaken. When I was called to the stand, I inhaled deeply and walked forward. My heels echoed across the floor, each step measured. I swore in, sat down, and looked directly at the jurors. "I thought I was losing my mind," I began, "but it was them trying to break it." I told them about the strange illnesses, the missed meetings, the way Daniel would hold my hand while helping to destroy me behind my back. I spoke of Olivia's sharp compliments and sugar-coated insults, the meals that made me sick, the tea that nearly sent me to the ER, and the morning that changed everything, the brunch where their plan finally exposed itself. My voice didn't waver. My hands didn't shake. Because I had already lived through the worst part, not knowing who to trust. When I stepped down, I didn't look at Daniel. I didn't need to. His head was bowed, his knuckles white. Olivia refused to meet my gaze, her mask now shattered. The defense tried to spin it. They claimed stress, confusion, lack of intent. That it was all a misunderstanding, just an overreaction to a few poorly chosen actions. But their arguments sounded hollow in the wake of confessions, screenshots, and chemical reports. The prosecution closed powerfully. This was not an accident. It was a coordinated attack masked in kindness. A betrayal of both the heart and the body. Valerie Monroe trusted them, and they fed her poison. The room fell still. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, no one moved. The forewoman stood. Her voice clear. "We find both defendants guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, and reckless endangerment." I exhaled slowly, not with triumph, but with release. The judge spoke next. "The court finds that the defendants acted with deliberate malice. The severity and repetition of their actions warrant the maximum sentence." Daniel slumped. Olivia stared ahead, stone-faced. The gavel fell. They were escorted out in cuffs. As I stepped outside the courthouse, the sunlight hit me differently. Not just because the case was over, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. The truth had been spoken, in a place where lies used to live. And now, the rebuilding could begin. Exactly 1 year after that brunch, the one with the poisoned coffee, I stood at the center of a polished stage beneath spotlights and a glowing banner that read, "Nashville Women in Business Leadership Summit." The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the very career milestone Olivia had tried to steal. The very future Daniel thought he could derail with quiet sabotage and feigned affection. But here I was. Not in a hospital bed. Not fading behind the scenes. Standing firm. Standing visible. I wore a simple navy dress. I didn't need flash. I had the floor. And the room, over 400 professionals, executives, and aspiring entrepreneurs, was listening. Success, I began, is often described in numbers. Contracts, revenue, client wins. But what no one prepares you for is what success attracts. Jealousy, doubt, sabotage. I paused. The silence stretched, focused. For a year, I thought I was losing my mind. I questioned my memory, my body, my own instincts. Until I stopped apologizing for being suspicious, and started investigating why I kept getting sick. I saw heads nod. I wasn't the only one who had been there. Not necessarily with poison, but with betrayal dressed in silk and familiarity. I documented everything, I continued. Because when people smile while they hurt you, you need more than feelings to prove the truth. You need facts, evidence, and the courage to expose it. In the front row, my new marketing director, someone I hired personally, beamed with quiet pride. The Henderson account, the one Olivia tried to sabotage, had led to 3 other major clients. I had expanded my own consultancy division and was now one of the most sought-after brand strategists in the Southeast. Integrity, I said, voice steady, doesn't just mean doing the right thing. It means surviving what's done to you and never losing the part of yourself that wanted to build something real in the first place. After the speech, a line formed. Not for photos, but for conversations. Young women. Seasoned executives. People who had been silenced or sidelined or second-guessed. One woman, probably 25, shook my hand with trembling fingers. How did you stay so calm? When everything felt like it was breaking. I smiled softly. I didn't, I said. But I stayed deliberate. I let myself feel everything, then I wrote it down, stored it, and used it. She nodded, eyes gleaming with understanding. That evening, I returned to my apartment. The sun dipped below the Nashville skyline, casting gold across my kitchen, where no one else had touched my food in months. I made coffee. Black. No strange smell. No watching eyes. Just silence and the hum of my own breathing. I checked my email and found a message from the Henderson team. They had renewed their contract for another 3 years. In the same thread, another prospective client waited, someone who had seen my story in a local business magazine and wanted to work with me directly. I closed my laptop, letting the quiet settle. Somewhere, I imagined, Daniel and Olivia were beginning their prison terms. The local news had covered their sentencing with clinical brevity. I didn't read the articles. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I didn't need them anymore. Their names weren't part of my story now. Not really. My name was Valerie Monroe, and I had made sure the world would remember it. 6 months after the trial, I received an invitation printed on heavy ivory cardstock, the kind that still smelled faintly of ink and intent. It was from the National Association of Strategic Leaders. They wanted me as their closing keynote speaker for the Global Summit in San Francisco. My story had traveled further than I expected, shared in forums, cited in business podcasts, and referenced in leadership seminars under one recurring theme: resilience in the face of betrayal. I sat at my desk holding the card, tracing my finger over the embossed lettering. Not long ago, I had sat at this same desk feeling nauseous, lightheaded, and confused, wondering why my own life felt like it was slipping out from under me. Wondering why 2 people I loved were quietly destroying me one sip at a time. Now, this same space had become something else. It was quiet, yes, but not empty. It was mine. Every inch of it spoke of survival. The framed headlines. The contracts. The testimonies of clients who had stayed. Not because I had won court cases, but because I had won back myself. When I arrived at the summit, I wore white. Sharp lines. Clean fabric. No frills. Just presence. The kind of presence I once dimmed for others to shine. The room was massive, filled with leaders across industries. I stood backstage as the host spoke, her voice clear and full of energy. And now, to close this summit, Please welcome a woman whose story has reminded all of us what it means to not only survive sabotage, but to turn it into strength. Valerie Monroe. Applause roared as I stepped forward. This time, I didn't speak from wounds. I spoke from wisdom. I'm not here to tell you how to win, I began. I'm here to tell you how to lose, without being broken. Because no one teaches us what to do when the people we trust weaponize our success against us. When they smile at us while taking from us. When we start questioning our instincts because their lies are dressed in love. The room fell still. I almost let it happen, I continued. I almost let their version of reality swallow mine. But something inside me refused to die. Something in me, quiet but unyielding, said, document. Watch. Build your case, even if no one else sees it yet. I paused. I call that voice evidence of truth. Not legal evidence, human evidence. The kind that whispers, asterisk, you're not crazy. They're just careful. Asterisk. There were people wiping their eyes. People sitting taller. The coffee was poisoned, I said plainly. But what almost destroyed me wasn't the substance. It was the manipulation. The gaslighting. The softness with which they tried to erase me. The lights felt warm now. Not like interrogation. Like illumination. So now, I lead differently, I said. I hire with intention. I protect boundaries like sacred ground. And I mentor others not just to grow, but to never shrink for the comfort of others. When I finished, the applause was different. Not just loud. Lasting. Backstage, a younger speaker approached me. You didn't just inspire them, she said. You freed them. I smiled gently. That's what truth does. It doesn't just set you free. It gives others permission to stop pretending they're fine. That night, alone in my hotel suite, I looked out over the city skyline. I had no interest in revenge. What I wanted, what I had built, was something far more powerful. A legacy. Not of perfection, but of proof that the quietest voices can rise, when they refuse to stay small.